Hi, I'm Amy Robbins, and I'm one of the tax partners here at Parry. Just to run through some of the other changes that the budget could bring. They have already ruled out hikes to income tax, employee national insurance, and VAT, but they're likely to look at options relating to employer national insurance, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, and various duties, including that on fuel. So just to run through the capital gains tax changes, the rate of capital gains tax at the moment depends on what you're actually selling. The tax on residential property is currently at a rate of 18% for lower rate taxpayers and 24% for higher rate taxpayers. Other gains can be taxed at 10 or 20%. This is historically one of our lowest rates because historically they have been up to 30%. The potential changes could relate to reintroducing some form of tapering for longer term gains and taxing shorter term gains more heavily, as is the case with the USA tax system. It could also be the case that the business asset disposal relief provisions that currently tax the first £1 million of relevant gains at 10% could only be made available for business assets held for a set period, for example, 5 to 10 years. There could also be the chance for the most widely used exemptions to be reduced. For example, there's no current ceiling on the private residence relief that's available when you sell your main residence. This could potentially be reduced to, say, 2 million. Other reliefs could also be reduced or restricted. For example, we currently have a £3,000 of annual exemption to offset against capital gains tax every tax year. This could be removed entirely. There's currently a relief for gains that arise on a disposal of a trading asset, so that could be shares in a trading entity. And holdover relief or rollover relief would potentially defer the gain if you transfer the asset to, say, a connected party, a family member. This could be restricted or removed completely. We could also see changes to business asset disposal relief. Turning to inheritance tax, if effective tax rises for capital gains tax are announced, the impact may be softened for business owners. For example, it wouldn't be surprising if the lifetime limit for business asset disposal relief, which taxes the first 1 million of gains at 10%, would be increased if the main rate of CGT increases sharply. There are other possible changes to inheritance tax, which include the current reliefs that are available. Two of the primary reliefs are business property relief and agricultural property relief. Business property relief will apply to reduce the inheritance tax by 50% or 100%, depending on the circumstances. This can also relate to farmland, where there is a hope value for that land, potentially if that land could be developed by a housing developer, for example. Agricultural property relief will only apply up to the agricultural value of the land and typically doesn't apply to farmhouses. We could see that the agricultural property relief is restricted for let farms. Potentially that could also be have an interaction with holdover relief. There's the potential for the removal of business property relief for the AIM shares, which are the alternative investment markets, listed shares. This is a very common investment strategy for those who are looking to hold quite a fluid investment, which qualifies for inheritance tax relief currently after a 2-year period. The current test for business property relief in relation to a company or a trade requires a 51% favour of trading activities over a 49% investment ratio. This is different to the current test for capital gains tax, which is actually 80% in favour of the trade and 20% in favour of the investment. There have been previous discussion points around aligning this to the inheritance tax ratio to the capital gains tax ratio. This would see a lot more entities which hold some investments or have a lower amount of trade pulled in to the inheritance tax web due to the inapplication of business property relief going forward. There have also been points raised around whether the government would consider reducing business property relief or agricultural property relief rates or capping the relief to a certain fixed value per person. This would align with what was known as entrepreneurs relief and is now business asset disposal relief, where the 1 million is the total amount that would be relieved at the 10% or relevant for the 10% rate of tax. This was previously 10 million. It could be possible for the government to bring in a limit on business property relief at, say, 1, 5 or 10 million, with any excess gains being taxed at the relevant inheritance tax rate. This would also impact transfers that relate to business property relief claims in lifetime. For example, if an individual wished to transfer an asset qualifying for BPR into a discretionary trust, there are no limits at the moment in relation to the amount that could be settled into a trust. If BPR did have a fixed value per person or a cap on the limit, that would also restrict lifetime planning and potentially lifetime inheritance tax that would be due. There is a current relief for gifting funds regularly from your income. There is no limit on this amount. This could be an excess income of, say, £5,000 or £10,000 a month that is gifted out of your estate, and there wouldn't currently be the requirement to survive 7 years of making that gift. There could be a cap put on that amount, so potentially the relief could be set at a maximum of £10,000 a year, for example. There could also be a review of the taxation of potentially exempt transfers and how that is dealt with in life and in the death estate. It's been speculated in the press that the government may consider removing the relief for pension funds on death, which is currently exempt for inheritance tax purposes. This would pull a significantly large amount of capital value back into the inheritance tax picture. Changes to the business property relief and agricultural property relief would be of particular concern to business owners. Despite their high combined cost to the government, it seems unlikely that these important reliefs will be removed completely that currently allow the passing on of family and businesses. Instead, we would expect them to be restricted by technical amendments to these rules and potentially lifetime caps. There have been changes announced that relate to the taxation of non-domiciled individuals. The proposals to date state that they would seek to replace the tax regime for non-doms with foreign income and gains regime. I've also written an article on this point if you would like to follow the link to read that. The concerns that relate to these changes primarily would see the wealthy non-doms leaving the UK. There have been suggestions that the government would look to soften this approach. The announcements in relation to these changes would also concern offshore trusts. Currently, if a non-domiciled individual has established a valid offshore trust known as an excluded property trust, the trust would remain outside of that individual's estate and outside of the UK tax system if it meets the qualifying conditions and does not hold assets in the UK. The proposals relate to changing this to align the inheritance tax system for trusts based on a residency regime. The government have announced that they're looking to soften these rules, so we do not have clarity in this area. Finally, turning to the pensions, there are potential proposals to remove the inheritance tax exemption for the residual pension funds on death. This could impact the taxation of an individual's estate as a whole. Currently, we have the additional residential nil rate band of 175,000 that's available for estates that are worth less than 2 million. If a pension fund is included within an estate, it's quite possible for the taxable estate to grow significantly in size and for that relief to be lost as a result. Finally, it could be the case the lifetime allowance on total pension savings is introduced again into some format, but perhaps exempting public sector pensions. There have been suggestions that employers' national insurance could be levied on pension contributions, or that the overall rate of income tax on relief and contributions could be cut to, say, 30%, or a maximum annual relief could be introduced. So just to round up on those budget changes that could potentially impact UK taxpayers, the conversations that we're having primarily at the moment with our client base relate to business owners who could be looking to maximise the current planning available in relation to lifetime gifts, looking at business property relief or holdover relief in relation to capital gains tax. Those are some of the themes that we are seeing. We are also speaking with clients who are looking to crystallize capital gains to make use of the current tax rates. So if this is something that you're looking at doing, please get in touch. I think a really good starting point for anybody is to consider the current position from both a capital gains tax perspective and an inheritance tax perspective. So we have a starting point to springboard some ideas. Looking at inheritance tax primarily, that would be just looking at the value of your estate and working from there. Finally, for the non-DOMs, given the lack of clarity that we currently have around trusts, we are looking at a worst case scenario and trying to support our clients with record keeping ahead of any changes in April. For non-DOM individuals, we would just be looking at whether you have any joint filing requirements with other countries and making sure that we're prepared to report things in the correct way from a UK point of view and with your offshore advisors. But please do get in touch if you'd like to discuss how these changes impact you, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you for listening.